can change today. No matter what people do, they can do for you. Live a life, and you won't regret it when you die. Live a life.
Are you ready? Okay, thank you. So, what I'm going to do is share with you the top 10 rules for building a global success. Starting with rule number 1. Rule number 1 is frequently misunderstood by entrepreneurs when they are pitching to investors. Entrepreneurs think that investors are focused on making money. But so a lot of entrepreneurs, they spend their time saying, you're going to make a lot of money if you invest in me. But that's not the way investors think about your company. And it's certainly not the way your customers think about buying your product. What do they care about? What they care about is the value you create. So focus on creating value, not on making money. So the flip side of this is there's a movie that basically there's a common sales training video will tell you that if you're a salesperson, your job is to take your money out of the customer's pocket. Has anybody ever heard this concept for sales? But it's a fairly common sales training concept. You know, it sounds kind of funny, right? They have your money in their pocket. Your job is to get your money out of their pocket. No. That is not the key to being successful as a salesperson. If you are trying to get customers, if you are trying to get investors, don't spend your time focusing on the money. Spend your time focusing on the value. So I learned this as a young entrepreneur. Long ago and far away, I was an entrepreneur. I like to think of myself as still being an entrepreneur. But my second company was an educational software company. And we hired a sales guy, this crotchety old guy from Boston, whose name is Dave. Now, I was 20-something at the time, so Dave, whom I thought was crotchety, he was probably 45, right? But in any case, so we're talking about our sales strategy, and Dave looks at me and he says, Bill, customers don't buy products. And I go, Dave, what are you kidding? What? How can that be? That's the only way we make money, right? He said, Bill, no, you don't get it. Customers don't buy products. They buy benefits. And so, side note here, this morning I listened to, 40 pitches. How many pitches did I listen to? I listened to about 40 pitches. Most of you guys, with all due respect, okay? Most of you guys, all we got was you describing your product. You know, we do BPO, we do AI, we do whatever, right? Mostly, what you did was you described your product. Very, very few of you described the benefit that you deliver to your customers. Now, I know you live and breathe your business, and so you think it's obvious what your benefit is, right? You all think it's obvious what your benefit is. But I'll tell you, your customers don't. Your customers don't think it's obvious. And investors rarely think it's obvious. So instead of focusing on the money, focus on the value you create. Instead of focusing on your product, focus on the benefits that your customers get. Does that make sense? Okay, good. All right. So lesson number 2 ties directly into this. Lesson number 2 is you gotta learn how to sell. So in pretty much every culture in the world, we disparage salespeople, right? Nobody goes into a 4th grade class and asks the kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? None of the kids raise their hand and say, I want to be a salesperson, right? Nobody says that. So that's crazy. If you're an entrepreneur, you've got to sell. You have got to sell, right? And so too often we get entrepreneurs who come to us with their vision, or they come to us with their cool technology, and they say, Bill, give me some money. We never give anybody money, by the way. We invest in companies, we don't give money. But they say, Bill, give us some money, and we'll go hire some of those salespeople, right? And that will make our sales go up. No. If you're an entrepreneur, you better be out there with the customers selling from day one. If you're not out there with your target customers selling, one, you're never going to figure out who's a good target, who isn't a good target. And two, you're never going to figure out if your product is the right product for your target customers. So you have to be out there selling. So that's what we want to know, is that you're not sitting there thinking, well, I've got a cool product and the world will be the path to my door. No. You've got to tell us that you've been out there talking to scores of customers or hundreds of customers, or you've reached thousands of customers, and you've spent your time figuring out what it is they want, what is your value proposition for them, how they buy, will they use it, what it's going to take to reach them, to communicate with them, to convert them. You got to know that. You can't just assume that, oh yeah, well, we're going to use distribution, or we'll put it in the Amazon store, or we'll put it in the iPhone store, or whatever. That's not good enough. You've got to be out there selling to your target customers. Lesson number 3, so you're thinking about going global, right? So now, when you go global, when you cross borders, you've got a lot of challenges. You've got a huge number of challenges that you've got to figure out when you go across the border. Sometimes you got to figure out the language. Sometimes you got to figure out regulations, the laws, the labor law, the tax law, the securities law, whatever, the banking law. There's a lot of work you have to do if you want to go global. One of the things you don't want to have to do is prove your value proposition. So if you're starting here, wherever you're starting, you certainly should figure out, do I have an airtight value proposition for my target customer base? Now, it might evolve when you go to a different country, to a different culture. Ideally, when you're going international, you want to go to the most like cultures, the most like countries, the most like languages, the most like regulations that you can. You can't always do that. But if you want to go from Colombia to the US, there's a huge leap there in terms of everything that you've got to figure out. So you better figure out before you go, before you spend all that money to try to set up in the US, you better figure out, do I have a compelling value proposition? And so, question to you guys is, how do you know if you have a compelling value proposition? How do you know if you have a compelling value proposition? Customer feedback, close. Product market fit, ding, 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 ding. Who said that? Okay, so what is product market fit? What is product market fit? What is product market fit? Yes, I want you to answer that. Well, I'd prefer somebody else answer it. First of all, does everybody here know what we mean when we say product market fit? Okay, help. Does everybody, okay. So product market fit, most entrepreneurs think if they've sold a couple of customers, they have product market fit. That's what they think. Is that product market fit if you have sold some customers? No, it's not. Why isn't, Natalia, tell me, why isn't that sufficient for product market fit? Okay. So you need to find a group of users that have adopted the product and are willing to buy more, right? That's what you're saying. I mean, it depends on your offering, whether there is an upsell, but right, okay. So that's good. So again, what are the metrics you're going to use to figure out if you have product market fit? You have a group of, how big is 5? No, that 5's not good enough? Yes, good. And how do you validate? What's the measure you use? What's the measure you use to figure out if your target users are your target users? Somebody? Okay, well, okay, yeah, that would be helpful. I'm sorry, guys. I wanted to make this a conversation, but okay. So here is what I strongly recommend that you guys think about to determine whether you have product market fit. So again, it's not actually, if you read the literature on product market fit, it's a little bit vague. It's a little bit vague, but there are some metrics you can use to figure out, do I have product market fit? And the best metric, I find, the best metric to figure out if you have product market fit is it easier to get the next customer than it was to get the last customer? Right? So it's really easy to get the first batch of customers, because in every market, there are a bunch of people who buy anything, right? Okay, so you get that first group, you get that first batch, and then now you have to actually start spending money, right? I mean, so I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs I hear who say, we have 2,500 downloads and we haven't spent a dime on marketing. Never say that, by the way, to an investor, okay? But does that mean they have product market fit? No, they've got downloads, I don't know, right? So a metric that you should be thinking about, is it harder or easier to get the next customer? If it's easier, then boom, you've got a value proposition, you've got a target market, you've figured that out. So that means product market fit. So that's key to making sure that you have a compelling value proposition for a known target audience before you spend the money to go global. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so this one doesn't make a lot of sense. So what we've learned in Silicon Valley over the years is that, in fact, building a team is key to your ability to scale, right? We know this, that's kind of obvious, right? What I didn't realize was when I was an entrepreneur, so I started my career as an entrepreneur. I started my first company when I was a grad student at Stanford, and then did 4 more companies, 2 of which went public, and then I decided to become a VC. Well, I was invited to become a venture capitalist. So that was kind of my journey. And when I was an entrepreneur, what I didn't understand was, what's the best way to build a team? I thought the great thing about being an entrepreneur was you were no longer just an employee cog in the wheel for some big, faceless, monstrous corporate entity, right? Somebody said this morning, I don't want to just be an employee, right? So I thought the big idea behind being an entrepreneur was that I could get together with some buddies, we start up a company, we play ping pong, we give each other back rubs, we sing Kumbaya, and that was, wouldn't that be fun? Yes, we work 24/7, but then what I found out, we were in the conference room, we're trying to figure something out, and we start yelling at each other. Wait a second, how could that be good? We were yelling at each other over, what's the right answer to this question? And so I thought that has to be dysfunctional. But when I poked around to look at the highest performing teams in technology, what I discovered is in the highest performing teams, there's a lot of conflict. Wow, that's weird. Why is that? How can that be? If our vision is aligned, why is there a lot of conflict? Well, it has to do, did you have an answer? Okay, there we go. Okay, so what I learned is that you can't suppress conflict. You don't want to suppress the conflict. You want to tap the conflict. You want to tap what is someone else has referred to as creative conflict. So fighting can be productive if you fight the right way. And that's the hard part. So I like to explain this point in the form of a parable. It's the parable of the optimist, the pessimist, and the engineer. So some of you have heard some of this before, right? So the optimist, I don't have my visual aid, but okay, the optimist is the person who looks at the glass and says, hey, this glass is half full. And the pessimist is the person who looks at the same glass and says, no, this glass is half empty. And the engineer is the person who looks at the same glass and says, this glass was engineered to be twice as big as it needs to be. But bump. Okay, the point of the story. Thank you. The point of the story is same set of facts, 3 different perspectives. And what you learn as an entrepreneur is you want these different perspectives on your team. You don't want to hire a whole bunch of people who think just the same way you do. You need the different perspectives. Obviously, you need the optimist, right? And hopefully all of you are optimists. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here, right? Because this is a crazy tough job you're taking on. So hopefully you're all optimists. So most founders are optimists. Believe it or not, you need the pessimist. You need somebody on your team who is thinking, if we don't get that deal, if we don't hire that person, if we don't raise that money, how are we going to keep this thing going? How are we keeping this alive? You need that contingency planning mentality. Optimists tend to be in denial. Pessimists tend to think about the worst case. You balance out. But you need this third perspective as well. The third perspective, I call the person an engineer, probably not an engineer. The third perspective is really a person who sees the world for the way the world really is, who sees the world objectively. This is the hardest mindset to find in a startup company. It's really hard to find people who are objective because you hired them because they believe in your dream, right? So that's why you hired them, because they believe in your dream. But this is the person who is going to come back to the office and say, when a customer doesn't buy our product, it's not because the customer is an idiot, right? The founder generally thinks, the founder goes to a customer and says, hey, look at this product, isn't it great? The customer goes, meh, The founder's attitude toward the customer is, well, he's an idiot. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. But, right, that's the founder attitude, right? That's great. That's a great attitude to have, right? But you need that person who will come back in and say, not all the competitive products are worthless for all of the customers out there. Some customers, believe it or not, actually prefer this and this and this about the competitive product. So you need that objective voice in your company, somebody who will be a truth teller. Sometimes that person is called the voice of the customer. But you need that objective voice in your company. So you need all of these different perspectives. But if you have all of these different perspectives, what's going to happen when you're trying to make a decision? You're going to fight, right? You're going to fight. So the trick for founders is, how do I have these discussions that turn into arguments, tap the best of these discussions, and then bring the team back together again? And so it's hard. It's not easy. There's this concept called disagree, then commit, which is to say, I want to hear everybody's perspective. If you think there's a different way to do this, let us know. And put it on the table, and you have a culture that allows people to disagree. That's a hard one. Sometimes founders sort of demand the loyalty, right? So if you speak up in a meeting and you contradict the founder, what happens to you? Hopefully, right? In some companies, you get slammed. In a healthy environment, the founder appreciates the brilliance of your different perspective, or somewhere in between. But the point here is, you've got to create a culture to allow people to express their differences of opinion, and then figure out a way to come together. And the deal is, if you sabotage the decision because it wasn't the decision you wanted us to make, if you sabotage that decision, then you're off the bus. So you've got to create that culture of disagree, then commit. So that's lesson number 4. Lesson number 5. Okay, so now you want to cross borders, you want to go global. Say, for example, you want to come to Silicon Valley, right? So what I urge entrepreneurs to do, wherever they're going, is you've got to go native. What do I mean by that? So you've got to show that you are committed to this geography. You're committed to this country, to this market. Because the reality is, nobody buys from visitors, and nobody invests in visitors. So, but I can't tell you how often, I'm in Silicon Valley and I'm meeting with an entrepreneur, and they tell me, nobody gives me business cards anymore. So I don't get business cards, but they say, well, let's WhatsApp, right? And so I'm WhatsApping with them, and I got a phone number. What's the area code? What's the country code? 57, right. Okay, so 57? 57, okay, right. So, I'm WhatsApping, and hey, everybody here, that's fine. I get it, you're here, right? But when you come to Silicon Valley, don't give me a 57, give me a 1, okay? I want to know that you're here. Don't give me a business card that says that your address is Bogota. Give me a business card that says your address is Palo Alto. So if you're just visiting, that's fine. We'll be nice to you. We'll talk with you. We'll have coffee with you, maybe. But we're not going to invest in you. We got to see that you're committed to the geography that you're moving in. So that's true if you're going, to the US, to Europe, to wherever you're going. You've got to show that you're committed, because the customers, the investors, won't invest in visitors. Okay? So how do I go native? How do I connect in? So it seems like it should be obvious, but people know that they should be networking. They try to network, but very few entrepreneurs are really good at networking. So, the reality is, it's interesting. I don't know what percentage it is, but it turns out some significant percentage of entrepreneurs are actually introverts. Some are actually shy. And that's, okay. But that doesn't mean that you can't be good at networking. But you have to, if you are an entrepreneur, when you're going into a new market, you've got to have someone, if it's not you, someone on your team who is a relentless networker. And that doesn't mean just going to events and collecting names and collecting whatever. It means connecting. So networking is not about names and numbers. It's about connecting. And I'll tell you, one of the best ways to connect, which almost seems like a contradiction, but one of the best ways to connect is to ask for help. So one of the great things about being in the entrepreneurship ecosystem, and you heard it again this morning, Dea was just pounding on this point this morning. One of the great things about the entrepreneurship ecosystem around the world is entrepreneurs love helping other entrepreneurs. So the issue, however, is what's the right ask? So it's got to be an easy ask, right? It's got to be an easy ask. It can't be a hard ask. So figure out, so who is the person who does that at that company? Or do you know the name of this? Or, a little bit further up, if they're a friend, maybe, can you introduce me or connect me? So again, generally, that sort of ask is pretty simple. But it's amazing how powerful it is in determining whether or not that person is a connection. So if that person does just the smallest gesture to help you, then you have a connection. That's the way humans work. So it's disproportionate to the level of the ask if somebody is willing to help you on something small. So think about whenever you're networking and whenever you're teaching or working with your teams on how to network. There are books and books written on networking. I'm not gonna be able to be the expert on networking here. I'm just saying what I've learned over the years is that it can be much, much simpler than a lot of the books make it. And now you may or may not have exactly the right personality for stepping out there and asking, but it's something you should practice, right? You should practice asking. So a good friend of mine, a guy named Ken Singer runs the Sutarja Center for Entrepreneurship at the University of California, Berkeley. So Ken has this workshop he runs with entrepreneurs, which he calls rejection therapy. And what it is he creates a task set for entrepreneurs that is kind of meaningless, but it gets the juices going. So here's the task set. Here's an example of rejection therapy. You give everybody, every team in the group, you give them a pen. And you tell them, go out on the street and confront people, strangers you never met before. Go out on the street and meet people and say, I've got a pen. What will you trade me for this pen? And they seek the team that comes back after 90 minutes, with the most valuable product or return for trading that pen, wins. So it's a competition. Every entrepreneur has competitive juices, so that's going to get you going, right? You're going to try. You're not going to give up. But you go out on the street and you approach strangers and you ask them, you're going to get turned down, 90% of the time. 90% of the time. But what's astonishing is how often you don't get turned down. How often it is that entrepreneurs, so one entrepreneur, they came back with a bicycle. They went out with a pen and they came back with a bicycle. So another entrepreneur went out with a pen, came back with a massage therapist. So, in any case, but the point of the story, the point of the exercise is that if you're an entrepreneur, be ready to get rejected most of the time. That's life. But it turns out, you practice it a little bit, you kind of get used to it. If you believe in what you're doing, instead of taking rejection as a personal insult, you take rejection as a learning moment, right? You figure out, boy, now instead of trying to trade a pen, you're offering your crazy, wonderful product technology offering that you think everybody on the planet, should love, right? So you go to target customers and you say, what do you think of this? And they say, meh. And so you learn from that. Hopefully they'll explain to you why they don't care. And you learn from that. You figure out what are the characteristics of the people who are interested. And you realize you're not selling to Gen Z. Gen Z is a very heterogeneous population. You can sort of tell investors, we're selling to Gen Z. But no, you're selling to, people between the ages of 18 and 25 who have these characteristics and have these interests you've got to refine your persona and figure out what is exactly the sub group within Gen Z that you're actually selling to. So, in any case, that's part of the point of figuring out how to network, is getting out there, asking a lot of questions, asking for help, making connections that eventually, hopefully, will help you. Maybe they won't. Maybe it turns out you can help them, and then you pay it forward, right? Okay, so that's lesson number 6. Lesson number 7 is when you go global, when you cross borders, pretty much you have to go hire somebody to be sort of there full time. So sometimes we'll see that the founding team will move to the new geography. So particularly, if you're moving from a small country to a big country, the whole management team may move. That's okay too. But no matter what, you're going to have to hire people in the new country, right? So in the United States, in all the big centers, talent is really expensive. So talent is, much more expensive in the United States than it is in most other places in the world. And so that's a really big panic point for entrepreneurs because, they were paying their entire team the same thing that these 2 sales guys want, in Silicon Valley. Wow, ouch, okay? So what do? Well, so the challenge you've got is to make sure that you don't cheap out and just figure, I don't have enough money, I'm going to hire the cheapest person I can find. How do you find the best talent at the lowest price? You find true believers. That's a lot harder than a typical recruiting project. So you've got to be selling. You've got to be selling to prospective new employees. You've got to find people who think that your equity is going to be worth way more than the salary you're going to pay. Or they think this is so much more fun than what I'm doing now. Or, this will give meaning to my life, I could tell my kids. Whatever it is that causes them to become true believers, you figure that out, okay? Figure out what is it about your vision, your company, your team that is going to cause people to say, I really, really want to work with you. So hopefully you find people whose attitude is, so don't tell my partner this, but I would do what I do today. I do it for free. I have so much fun. I have so much fun doing what I do. Please don't tell my partner. So, in any case, but that's what you want, right? Isn't that what you want in people you hire? You want somebody who is so in love with the concept of what you're doing and the momentum, the vision, the impact, the quality of the team, the people you've got, whatever it is that's lovable about your company, that's going to get people excited about working. Find people who resonate with that. And so again, good people are still going to ask a lot. You want good people, you want smart people, right? So they're still going to ask a lot, but they're going to be more flexible. And the bottom line is, great talent is cheap. So, and that works in a couple of ways, right? So, great talent is somebody who is totally committed to what you're doing. And they're going to work their tail off to execute on what you are doing. So they're going to be incredibly productive. The flip side of that is you hire somebody cheap who is not particularly bought in. They're not passionate about what you're doing. They're going to show up at 9:15 and they're going to leave at 4:45, and you'll be lucky if you can get a full day's work out of them. So no matter how cheap they are, they're going to be really expensive to have around. Nobody on your team is going to like that person, right? So it turns out you find true believers, they are going to be the most productive, the least expensive people that you hire. Lesson number 8. This is a challenge I find all over the world, is I'm talking with entrepreneurs, and frequently I get this comment, not so much in Colombia, so we'll see, but I get this comment, Bill, you Americans, you like to talk, you like to brag, you like to exaggerate, but we in our culture, we were taught, to be modest, and there's different cultures around the world where, they have something called the tall poppy syndrome. So, help me. I mean, my sense is that you guys in Colombia are, you're pretty confident. Is that true? I don't know. So, but a lot of people, they don't have the level of the willingness to be assertive about what they're doing, because they just weren't trained to be assertive about what they're doing. And so what you need to figure out is how to get them to say, wow, what you've got is amazing, and with high confidence. So I will tell you, high confidence is way more attractive than false modesty, or true modesty for that matter. So I got into this debate on stage with another VC. We were talking about what we look for, what characteristics we look for in an entrepreneur. And so probably some of you know that we've had some issues in Silicon Valley with entrepreneurs who've been maybe a little over the top in terms of some of the things they've done. And so, if I can use the word, one of the discussion in this panel group was, how come so many entrepreneurs turn out to be assholes? Okay, that was a fun discussion. And my colleague sitting next to me was saying, we don't invest in assholes. We invest in nice people. And so I wanted to agree with her, but I said, Zoe, we don't want to invest in nice people. And she looked at me like, what? And I said, think about it. Do you really want your entrepreneur to be nice? What defines nice? A nice person, defers to other people around them. A nice person doesn't disagree. A nice person doesn't argue with you. A nice person doesn't push you, right? Is that what we want? And she goes, well, okay, I just don't want him to be an asshole, right? But my point here is, there's a line between, sort of high confidence and, asshole, right? Or arrogance, whatever. Very, very, very few entrepreneurs are pushing that line, right? So this morning, again, there were a couple of good examples. I think it was obvious. There were a couple of good examples of entrepreneurs who had high confidence, right? Okay, where is he? Is he in the room? Okay. There were a couple of examples, but, for the most part, the entrepreneurs were, we have a product and a technology, and we're developing. So to automate, we use AI, and we think we're going to make things better for people, right? Forgive me. I mean, I know it was kind of an awkward situation, but the point is, maybe there's something in between. I don't know, but maybe there's something in between. But please, get confident in what you're doing, and make sure you get your point across clearly, what it is you're doing, and then what is your wow? So what is your wow? Again, same as my first point about value, customers don't buy products. They buy benefits. So who's going to buy your product? It's going to be someone who hears what your value proposition is, and they say, wow, you can do that. I need that. I've been looking for that. Nobody else can do that. You really have that? I want that. So, how many people told us their wow this morning? So again, not to be critical here, but again, most of you described your product or service. Very few of you gave me a wow. Very few of you articulated a compelling benefit that you offer to your customers. There were maybe 3 or 4 of you who said 10x or half or some metric that was a significant metric for your customers, for the value you deliver to your customers. Most of you did not indicate at all why you were different from everybody else who does the same thing you do. Very few of you articulated why it is or how it is that you are 10 times better than all those other people who are using AI to do X, Y, or Z. So you've got to be 10 times better to get people's attention. So you can't just be a little bit better. You can't just be a little easier to use. You've got to be compelling. And so that's your wow. What is compelling about what you offer? What is it that's going to make your customers fall in love with you and say, I cannot live without you? That's what makes a successful company. What? Okay. So now he likes my product. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. So, next lesson. Somebody's in the way. I don't know. What's going on here? Close. Okay. And lesson number 9. So this is also a little bit confusing for some people. And one of my partners said, Bill, I don't really think you should be going out there saying this. But okay, just listen to me for a second. What I encourage entrepreneurs to understand is that innovation is not the same as invention. So a lot of entrepreneurs, basically engineers primarily, right? So engineers want to invent something new, generally. But you don't have to invent something new in order to be innovative. If you think about companies like Apple, what did Apple invent? Apple did not invent the microcomputer. Apple did not invent the WYSIWYG operating system. Apple did not invent the mouse. Apple did not invent the MP3 player. Apple did not invent the smartphone. Apple did not invent the smart tablet. Apple did not invent the smartwatch. What did Apple invent? The most successful company in the history of the world in terms of market cap did not invent anything. What did Google invent? One of the other successful. What did Google invent? Pardon? BigQuery. Oh, BigQuery. Okay. Everybody does a lot of BigQuery, right? Okay. So what Google comes along and sees all these other search engines out there and says, hey, all these other search engines are searching based upon the popularity of the websites. They're indexing against the popularity of websites. Google was founded by 2 grad students at Stanford who said, well, that's silly because we know in academia, how do you rate papers? How do you rate where are our professors? Are they here? No. So how do you rate papers in academia? In academia, you rate papers not by their popularity, you rate papers by the number of citations of those papers. And so they said, let's do that for the web. Let's rank pages based upon links to those pages. Who else thinks that this is a good page? You measure that with the number of links, and that became Larry Page's page ranking patent. So they didn't even invent the sort of core idea. They stole it from academia. I mean, they borrowed it, whatever. So then, how does Google make money? Advertising. So the key to Google's financial success was pay-per-click advertising. So in this case, they literally stole pay-per-click. So they stole pay-per-click from another company in Southern California, which said, wait a second, you stole that. And they said, what are you going to do about it? And they said, we're going to sue you. So they went to court, and I don't know, like 7 years later, the courts finally agreed, Google, you stole that intellectual property. You now have to pay. So the court said to Google, you have to pay $100 million for stealing that technology. But by that point, Google said, okay, it was chump change for Google, right? So they literally stole pay-per-click, according to the courts. But my point here, so I'm not encouraging, so my point here is, I'm not encouraging you to break the law, okay? So it's okay to steal ideas. You think, again, Steve Jobs and laser printing, he takes a calligraphy course and he says, boy, why can't we use these fonts with laser printers to create elegant printouts instead of these crappy printouts that, Adobe was producing? So you can steal ideas. You can steal talent in some countries, in some locations. The great thing about California, the reason Silicon Valley beat Boston in the war for innovation, for being the center of innovation in the United States. So venture capital started in Boston, not in Silicon Valley. But Massachusetts had labor laws that said you can't steal talent. California said, we're not going to enforce anti-compete agreements in corporations. So you can steal people in California. You can't steal intellectual property, but you can steal people. But you can't steal cash. Don't steal cash, okay? So Sam Bankman-Fried, no, okay? That's not allowed, okay? And so thank goodness the jury figured that out. You can't steal cash. But the whole point of innovation is not to invent new things, it's to scan the globe for ideas that you can put together in a novel way to create a commercial product that people love. And that's what Apple gets credit for. Not inventing things, but borrowing things that they've come across elsewhere in the world that they are managed to put together in products that people love. So, don't go out and tell everyone, well, Bill said we could steal. Just do it quietly, okay? Okay, so, and then lesson number 10. Lesson number 10 is as you go around the world, as you build your global success story, it's really important to make sure that you make new mistakes. Again, that's part of the whole point of events like this, is to create communities where people share what works and what doesn't work, where people connect and offer advice and support to help you make sure that you don't make the mistakes they made. So sort of part of my whole history, and the reason I'm here, is that sort of growing up as an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, I was very much inculcated with this concept of pay it forward. And so when we started our venture fund, one of the things we wanted to do was to share with entrepreneurs, all the lessons that we had learned. The mistakes we had made. I had a great discussion during lunch about one of my biggest mistakes. Are you guys in the room? So one of my biggest mistakes was I passed on Tesla. Okay. So this was way back at the beginning. This is before Elon Musk came to Tesla. So if you don't know, Elon Musk was actually not a founder of Tesla. So I met the original two founders of Tesla when they were just spinning up the company, and I decided, these guys are nuts. There's no way they're going to pull this off. So, whatever. So I didn't invest. In any case, so I try to learn from my mistakes, and I try to share them, and I try to sort of get entrepreneurs and other venture investors, to bring forward not just their successes, but also their mistakes, and share their mistakes. So how do you do this? Well, you find good mentors. So if you're going to go to another country, there've got to be people in that country, ideally people who might come from your culture, who might come from a similar background, who went before you, who got to that country, they made a whole bunch of mistakes, they learned from their mistakes, and they share them with you. And also formalize that. Mentorship is somewhat informal, but we really encourage entrepreneurs formalize the mentorship by building an advisory board. Find people who are willing to commit to you, more than just a couple of coffees, who are willing to commit to you some time over years to help you make sure you don't make the same mistakes other people have made. So you want to build an advisory board that has a bunch of complementary skills, just like your team. They're not all the same. They come from different backgrounds. They've been successful in different ways. And so you're going to get a rich range of advice from the advisory board. The challenge everybody has with their advisory board is a lot of times, successful people tend to want to tell you how to run your company. So hopefully you find advisors who are willing to offer their perspective and let you decide how to run your company. But sometimes you get mentors or advisors who are more likely to want to tell you how to run your company rather than offering their perspective. So you want to filter for that. Sometimes if you can find a radically successful person who has unbelievable connections, you might put up with a little bit of that, as a trade-off. But ideally, you found people who know how to mentor, who know how to give advice, who won't try to control you or control your company when you're building your advisory board. So those are the top 10 new rules for going global. Create value, learn how to sell, prove your compelling advantage, your compelling value proposition before you move. Build an unbalanced team, go native, tap the power of networks, hire true believers, be highly confident, understand what your wow is, and say it with confidence. Go ahead and steal, but don't break the law. And then build an advisory board, find mentors to make sure you make new mistakes. So those are the top 10 rules. I'll share the slides if you want. Another aspect of my objective in sort of paying it forward is to try to help entrepreneurs figure out how to articulate what they're doing. And so I got a friend of mine to convince me to co-author a book with her called Getting to Wow, and that's where you hear that metaphor that I mentioned earlier. It's really important when you are pitching investors, when you're pitching customers, when you're pitching potential employees, when you're pitching potential advisory boards, partners, whatever, that you know what it is about your company that is extraordinary, that separates it out from everyone else, that you can articulate that clearly so they know what you mean, and that you've got evidence to prove that what you're saying is true. So that's the key to getting to wow. The winner tomorrow gets a free copy of the book. Angelica made me price it at the lowest possible price on Amazon. And then Amazon just increased their rules, but it's only $14.95 on Amazon. But I will tell you, anybody here who feels I cannot afford $14.95, I will send you a free copy if that's what you want, okay? So, all right. The other thing that I did is, there's a group in the United States called the Kauffman Foundation. It's the largest entrepreneurship foundation in the United States. And so they asked me if I could put together a curriculum for them on startup finance. So I wound up doing a series of videos on startup finance, which is available at the Kauffman Foundation. It's based on a course that I taught at Berkeley to actually the engineering school. I taught them startup finance, which was fun, teaching engineers finance. But what I encourage entrepreneurs is if you go through this and everything I say makes sense, then you're probably good enough in terms of finance, right? So as an entrepreneur, you have to understand the economics of your business. You cannot defer that to your CFO or to somebody else who's good with spreadsheets. You've got to understand the economics of your business. You've got to understand how to monitor and manage your key performance indicators. And that's mainly what I talk about in these videos. So it's not that bad. It's only about an hour and 15 minutes across 10 modules or something like that. So I tried to do bite-sized pieces. So that is The Art of Going Global. That's how you find me on social media. And I don't know how much time we have left. How are we doing on time? Oh, we're done. We're done. Okay. Okay. I'll see you all at the reception. Okay.
Man in the mirror, you can be a hero, no matter what people say.